Well, Barry Livingston, this is great to see you.
It's been a struggle to get together with you guys, but cheers.
I know. Cheers. Look at that. You got a nice, nourishing cup of tea there.
Very, very Christmassy. Got my snowman and all
Oh, wow. It's beaut to see you again, Barry. And I also want to say that I spoke to your brother Stanley, a month or two or maybe three back. Time does go like that, doesn't it? And ever since that interview went up here on Celebrity Drop, there have been a cavalcade, an avalanche, literally a tsunami of requests from fans of yours saying, please, Barry Livingston, please, can you bring us some Barry Livingston? So look, via the joys and wonders of Zoom, here am I zooming into your Los Angeles home, you're beaming into mine, and I know now officially there are fans all around the world very excited.
I'm shocked and always surprised at how much I've affected people and how much my three sons obviously is still the 800-pound gorilla in my world. But yeah, it's lovely, that people still remember and are interested in what I'm doing now.
Well, it's not just my three sons. You've had the most diverse and showbiz rich life. I mean, think about it, 66 years that you've been kind of burning things up in Tinseltown.
Yes, 66 years. That's a hard number to swallow. I was lucky. I started very young. My mother was probably the driving force in all of that. Not that she had a burning desire to get us, my brother Stan, who has preceded me in the business.
Yes.
But we used to go to a swim school, and this was back in the 50s in Hollywood, and it was the baby boom. And at this particular it wasn't a public pool, it was a private pool, but a lot of industry people would take their kids there, producers, directors, casting people, and we got spotted. Stan got spotted by somebody to stunt double for John Provost, I believe, in the original Lassie, a drowning episode. And so that started the ball rolling, and the light bulb went off in my mother's head to go, this could be fun and make a few shekels for the family. And next thing you know, we're in movies with Paul Newman and working with Ozzie and Harriett Nelson. And then my three sons came along, and that's where it all started.
Your mum and dad, though, were not in the biz in any way, were they?
Well, yeah, sort of. They were from Baltimore. My dad owned burlesque theaters. And my mother was, from Gypsy Rose Lee. She was a fan dancer, a stripper, pretty much.
Well, then how wrong am I? They were in the biz.
They were in the biz, but at a very low rung in the biz. But to this day, I think it's a hoot. And if you ever met my mother, you'd understand. Yeah, she was perfect material for that world and for that profession. And so, yes, that was their exposure to show business. Back in the day, the theaters that they owned, the Clover, the Globe, they had two or three that they had in Baltimore. It was a 24/7 operation. There would be the feature film, the A movie, the B movie, a cartoon. There would be a documentary. There would be live acts, comedians. There would be dancers like my mother, and it went on all night long. So that was, they were familiar with show business and knew stars, and they knew the names of people, but they didn't know anybody when they came out here, I guess in 1950 from Baltimore, and then wound up at that pool that I was talking about and met people, and that's sort of where it went.
Do you ever remember as a kid your mother kind of practicing her fan dance around the living room?
No, in fact, I didn't find that out, honestly, till after she passed away, and she sadly kind of died young. And my aunt, who was also a friend of hers back in the day, she, I always thought she would always say, "Oh, I was a dancer." And I said, "Oh, great." Picturing the, the Bolshoi ballet, the, Paris, really high-end things. And of course, I was enlightened by my aunt, who said, "Oh no, dear, we were strippers. We were like, we were at the Gypsy Rose Lee fan dancers." I was like, "What?" And I was like, "Oh, everything then clicked." I went, "Oh, okay," because she was salty and swore like a pirate and drank and smoked pot and everything else you could figure. And I went, "Okay, now that makes perfect sense now that I found out that little clue." Yes, that's who my mother was. And so she was a a pretty wild, free spirit. So yeah.
Oh,
It's
how
fun.
wonderful. It sounds like she'd be the perfect target of a biopic, quite frankly. Look, you booked your first movie role, I think it was 1957, the Paul Newman, Joanne Woodward movie, Rally Round the Flag Boys. How old were you?
Well, again, it was another serendipitous moment. I accompanied my brother to an audition at 20th Century Fox Studios, and he was reading for one of the sons that Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward, one of the characters in it. You know, in those days, you go in. I sat in the outer office with my mom. Producers come out with Stan after he read for them. They go, "Yeah, we love your kid. I think we're going to hire him." And they go, and they saw me sitting there, and they go, "Who's that?" And they go, "Well, that's his brother." And they go, "Does he act?" And she, and you know, I didn't know. My mother's going, you know, elbowing me, nod, yeah, say yes, you know, uh-huh. And so they go, "Well, you know, we're going to cast two kids here." So as it turned out, I don't know if I went. I don't even recall if I went in the room or they just gave me the role. But that was the first job that I had was playing Paul Newman and Joan Woodward's son in Rally Round the Flag Boys.
And you're
And
what, about 4 or 5 years
I was
old?
4 years old. Four. But to
4.
complete the story, in the middle
Yeah.
of my eyes randomly, you know, uncontrollably started crisscrossing. And I wasn't wearing glasses at the time. And the director and producer were getting very upset with me because they thought I wasn't looking, you know, when you have crossed eyes, I can be looking at you, but it looks like I'm looking across the room. And they got, you know, we're shooting a scene and they wanted me to just look straight ahead at a TV. And I thought I was. And that's all I had to do in the scene, really, ignoring Paul Newman, who had just walked into the room and said, "Hi, boys." And we're just supposed to ignore him. Well, it looked like I was looking over here when, anyway, this long story short, they rushed me to a hospital and because they thought maybe I was having a seizure or something. And then they said, no, he's got a problem with his eyes. He's got astigmatism. He needs glasses. Came back to the set a day or two later. And they said, "Barry needs glasses. He's got to wear glasses from now on." And the director and producer looked at each other and go, "Yeah, we didn't see Paul Newman's son having glasses in this." And so I was fired on the spot. And
Oh,
I'm still in the movie. In the very first scene, I'm upside down because they've Joanne Woodward and a guy, Percy Kilbride, who was a character actor, had me. I swallowed some coins and they were swinging me. So the kid you see upside down, that's me in the rest of the movie. When the kid is standing upright or sitting, it's a whole other child actor that they hired to replace me.
how did that feel at 4 years of age,
Pretty
being
crappy.
unceremoniously dumped like that, and yet your brother,
Yeah,
Stanley, is still in the movie? That must have hurt.
pretty crappy. I remember very vividly, strangely enough, one of my being taken to a limousine, put into, and Paul came into the well, in fact, my mother made one of these grandiose statements because they said, you know, we have to let Barry go, but he can be on, you know, he can stay on, he can be the stand-in for this other boy. And you know, my mother went, no, 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 Barry's going to be a star. So anyway, Paul came in and, you know, was very sweet and, you know, and had some very nice, kind words and, "Don't worry, kid, things will work out." And then it was led to like a limousine and driven off the lot, fired. Welcome to Hollywood, you know, just dropped like a hot potato. And that was my first big gig, which, you know, lasted for about a week or so. And then
Yeah, well, you know, I think that's what they call baptism by fire, but at least you're in the movie. But you had some remarkable memories of working with Paul. Like, for instance, he crawled inside the TV set to
yeah.
try and help you. He really wanted to bring the best out of you, didn't he?
Well, he knew the director, a guy named Leo McCarey, old school, you know, this 1957, 58. So Leo McCarey had been around since the 20s, probably silent era, and he was an old-fashioned screamer. You don't see these directors like that anymore. And he was losing his mind, screaming at me that I'm not paying attention and you need to look at the TV. And then Paul intervened and said, hey, you know, come on. It's a little kid here, you know, like, somebody get me a puppet. You got the establishing shot. You saw the kids on the sofa and me walk in. We'll do it in close-ups, because he was thinking like a director already back then. Said, "Somebody give me a puppet." It was a big old boxy 1950s stand. He climbed in it and started waving a little puppet at me and trying to keep my attention on the box. And they were getting a close-up of us. And still, you know, it looked weird to the camera that I wasn't paying attention. So So Paul did his best to try to save my ass. Unfortunately, it wasn't good enough, but he was great. Paul was famously an actor studio, uh, method actor kind of guy. And he would come into the classroom. This is before I was fired. And he'd sit down in our classroom and try to go over homework with us or math problems, because he was really trying to establish a relationship with Stan and I as, like, a father, a mentor. So I didn't understand it then. I just thought, okay, well, whatever. But he was kind of taking the extra effort to bond with us, which I thought was really sweet.
You had a small role in a Jerry Lewis movie called The Errand Boy. Do you have any memories of Jerry Lewis at all?
I do recall him. Again, I was very young, but I do recall filming the scene. It's a kind of a funny little moment in The Errand Boy where we're on a studio lot. We come into the candy store, three kids, and we keep making him going up and down a ladder to get jelly beans. And he was directing the film as well and had written it and starring in it. And I do recall him being very manic, just being manic. That as a kid, to me, it caught my attention, that he was running all over the place and, behind the camera, in front of the camera, doing, but at a very high speed. And I thought, that's really odd, and I remember they were practicing a dolly shot with the camera, and he was so oblivious and so running around. He just like ran right in front of the camera. The guy like slammed into him and knocked him down. I was like, man, this guy's, he's nuttier than most kids I know.
But your star really began to shine in the 60s, and you referenced it just a moment ago in that wonderful series, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriett. What are your memories of working on that show?
Well, again, Stan had opened the door there. He had already started doing some guest roles on that. Ozzie was aware that I was an actor. I'd done The Errand Boy and a couple other feature films and things. So he knew I was an actor, and I could see him kind of looking at me, and he was that kind of guy that he liked working with family and people that he could feel comfortable with. And so he knew us through my brother working there. And he said, I'm going to put your brother Barry in this one scene. And again, strangely enough, it was a schoolroom, a classroom scene, and I was too short to be seen by the camera at the back of the room to go up to the chalkboard and write something out. I was like way down here, and the kids' heads were here, and the camera was there. So he said, I don't think we can do this with Barry. And anyway, so one thing led to another. Stan eventually got on My Three Sons very, very quickly after that in 1960, I guess, when My Three Sons was originally broadcast, the pilot and everything. And so then he started using me in place of Stan. So I wound up doing maybe 16 episodes of the Ozzie and Harriett show. Got my first guest star billing on their show. They were just a lovely group of people, a lovely family.
You got to work with Lucille Ball in The Lucy Show on several occasions. And of course, there's that classic episode, Barry, where she gives you a haircut. And I guess it's no great shock that was actually a wig that you were wearing that kind of made you look like a young incarnation of Elvis. What was the Lucille Ball like to work with that you got to see?
Well, behind the scenes, she was, an executive producer, had a lot of, wasn't just an actress for hire. She was obviously the star of the show, but she a taskmaster. And when she didn't think a thing was funny or working, she would make that quite well known to the writers. And, and she was blunt. I mean, she was in control. And very sweet to me. And I think I was already working on My Three Sons as the friend next door. So literally, next door to the My Three Sons soundstage was her stage where she was doing the Lucy show.
Yes.
And so she would, I think she had her eye on me, and she used me as Mr. Mooney. Gail Gordon was the boss at the bank, and she worked in this series. So I was Arnold Mooney. In that episode, and one other one I did where we were Boy Scouts. And eventually I got a bigger role on My Three Sons, because I think she requested to be, I could be used again. And the people that now had me under contract for in My Three Sons said, no, we need Barry on this exclusively. And so, but I'd see her on the lot because she owned Desilu, which was the studio that we worked at. And she was always like, I'd see her kind of racing by in her golf cart from her dressing room and offices down to the set, and have the bandana on and a cigarette out of her mouth, and she'd be like, "All right, Barry," and I was like, "Whoa, jeez, that's she just knew my name. She just almost ran me over too." But that was Lucy that just said hi to me, and she knew who I was, and that always kind of pleased and shocked me.
I do love that episode where she gives you the haircut. It truly is one of those classics.
Yeah, that was another kind of fun little show to be part of.
1962, you make a movie with Debbie Reynolds, and I got to say, it was a hell of a cast of fabulous people.
Yes, no, I mean, I'm going to recite some of the names because it was Hans, the support was starring, it was David Jansen, Cliff Robertson, Debbie Reynolds, but then it was all the Alice Ghostley, Victor Buono, Hans Conried, on and on and on. 8 or 9 really, really top tier character actors that were in that as well. And Gower Champion was the director of it. And he was a huge Broadway director at that time. Anyway, yeah, Debbie was wonderful. She was everything that you probably thought she would be. She was tremendously supportive and sweet and kind to the kids. And strangely enough, she was actually doing double duty while we were shooting that. She was, probably the biggest female star in Hollywood at that point. And while she was shooting My Six Loves at Paramount on the weekdays, she would fly out on the weekends and go down to Kingman, Arizona, and was shooting How the West Was Won. And my brother Stan was playing her grandson in that movie. So she was getting a double dose of Livingstons at that point. But she said, she came to my mom one day, and that's something I've always kind of thought is a very nice thing. And she said, Barry has natural comedic timing. And she said, it can't be learned, but just know that he has a natural, it's very relaxed, very, it's what it is. You can't be forced. And if you got it, you got it. And if you don't, you don't. So I always thought that was very cool.
If I'm remembering, Alice Pierce, who was Gladys Kravitz from Bewitched, was also in that movie. And you just referenced Alice Ghostley, who was Esmeralda, I think, wasn't she, in Bewitched as well?
Jim Backus was another guy,
That's
Mr.
right.
Yeah. It's got to be 2 or 3 other names that I just the other day went through it again and going, oh my God, look at the cast that they assembled for this. Not just the top tier stars, but every great character actor of that era, was a part of this show. 7, 8, 9 really top tier people, which just said how much clout and prestige Debbie had at that time.
Oh, absolutely. And there was little old you in the middle of it all.
And I was Sherman the toilet flusher. Yes, that was.
But look, 1963, Hugh, along comes My Three Sons. You signed on as Ernie, of course, a role that turned you into arguably one of American television's first official nerds, right?
I wear that mantle proudly. I think I was a prototype nerd, because before that, most of the kids on TV series, particularly, were really good looking little boys, much like my brother Stan. They were usually blonde haired and cherubic and lovely little specimens. And I came along with, wild bowl cut and buck teeth and glasses and it was kind of I think it was just a dose of reality that was being introduced into films. That not every kid looked like Lassie, Johnny Provost, or Stan Livingston. There was a few mutts running around out there, and I kind of got that tag, and I think it was a cool thing to have.
So just refresh my memory, Barry, as to how Ernie came to be part of My Three Sons, the My Three Sons family, because he was the adopted son, as I recall it.
Yes, I was. Why they felt they needed an adopted son and a friend next door, I don't know. But, I think I was never told, because the original oldest son, Tim Considine, who played Mike, I think was already getting restless. I think he was looking for other things to do. I know he wanted to direct some of the episodes, and they let him direct one. I think MacMurray, who was, again, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, said, I don't want my boys, I don't want to be doing this regularly. He said, we'll give them one shot and that'll be it. So, they maybe had me in the bullpen. They kind of brought me on as the kid next door, a friend of Chip. And then, when Tim, who we all loved, he's just a great, great guy. In fact, I think he wrote me one of the best episodes that I had prior to being a son, where I played James Bond had just exploded in the world, and I played, some kind of secret spy in this little episode. But it was a takeoff on James Bond, and Tim wrote the episode. So he kind of really boosted my profile on the show. And then when, then again, when Tim went and his contract was up, they had somebody like me kind of waiting in the wings to come in. Again, I don't know if that was pre-planned or just they just looked around and go, oh, this will work. Yeah, and they knew what I could do, and they all liked me, and I'd already kind of established my credibility in their little Three Sons family. They knew me, and they knew me from other work. So it was just a natural transition to become a son.
There was Don Grady, of course, who played Robbie, Stanley, your older brother. He was Chip. But it's interesting, Barry, a little bit of trivia, because during the show's 12-year run, there were actually, I think, 4 sons and a daughter.
Yes, there was Dodie, who was the little girl. When Beverly Garland came onto the show in the last 2 or 3 years, she had a daughter. So that was a new person to come into the fold. And then the 4 sons, because it was really me, Ernie, Chip, Stan, Don Grady is Robbie, and Tim Considine is Mike. So 4 sons. But the way television works, once Mike went, man, you never heard from him again. I think he went to Peru and got lost in the jungle or something like that. They said he was in South America working on some project, and that was it. He never name was never mentioned again. And then there was the wives, Tina Cole, Ronnie Troop. So the cast kept growing. By the end, it was a lot of regular characters.
Fred MacMurray, of course, was the father, but I mean, he was a Hollywood superstar. He'd been in movies like Double Indemnity, and really, he was one of the first Hollywood movie stars that kind of broke that mold, didn't he?
Yeah,
and became a television actor back in the days when that was almost unheard of. How did you find Fred MacMurray to work with? Was he an austere man? Was he warm and generous and friendly?
He was friendly, cordial, never raised his voice at us, or if something on the set that he didn't like. You clearly understood he's the king of the kingdom there. But again, he was not an effusive, not a jolly guy, but not morose either. He was a real straight arrow American Midwestern guy. And no, by this time in his career, he has twins that he adopted. He was a family man. He didn't really want to do edgy movies anymore. He did a bunch of Disney films. He was very conscious of his image as the prototype American dad. So he was trying to live up to that, I guess. I mean, but again, he was, like the head of the corporation. We were the junior executives, all treated well with respect, but not like ever invited to his house for a party or Christmas presents. That just wasn't part of who Fred was. But we all loved and respected him. He was a genuinely sweet man, but again, a little bit kept his distance between us and that world.
Well, of course, the thing about Fred MacMurray is he was a really great saxophone player, and there are rumors that he may have played the sax on that fabulous My Three Sons theme song. Is that true?
He loved money, so unless they paid him scale plus 10 to come in and do that sax part, I seriously doubt he would have taken time away from his golf game to come in and record that. That was somebody else. But I do, here's an example of Fred. I wrote a song, and you can find it up on YouTube. It's called The Ballad of Fred MacMurray. And I just at one point about 4 or 5, 6 years ago, I said, I'm gonna write a little tribute song to Dad. And my brother Stan put together a really nice little video. So I went to one of his daughters, Laurie, and I said, I just want your approval and get your take on what you approve of it. And she loved it, and I think it's actually a really cool little song.
I knew the man, I called him Dad on a TV show, My Three Sons.
But before leaving, she said, I know you're a guitar player. Have you ever seen Dad's guitar? And I said, what? I know he played sax. He go, oh no, he was a really good guitar player. I said, you're kidding. I mean, he saw me on the set, day in and day out with my guitar, trying to learn to play. He'd walk by me. He never, ever went, oh, let me show you something. I know how to play the guitar too. When Laurie told me that, I was like, wow, that's just weird to me that he would not have in that moment just gone, hey, that's pretty good. I can do that too. Let me show you something. No, never. And anyway, she took me to a little room, and they had this beautiful Martin acoustic guitar. I was like, wow, that's a really nice guitar. It's probably worth 20 grand or something. And she said, oh yeah, no, he played it with George Gobel on a George Gobel special, and he and George did some duet. I was like, you're kidding me. I was gobsmacked. I just went, wow, to know that guy for as long as I knew him, and not know that he could play guitar, and not ever have a moment that he shared that with me. I wasn't hurt, but I just thought, I guess that's Fred. He was a very private guy and kept a lot, his personal life off the set.
You think of My Three Sons, and of course, immediately you are hit by that incredible theme. Everyone knows it. It's just one of the most iconic TV themes around. The great Frank DeVol, I think, created that. He did the Brady Bunch, the Love Boat, and so many others. But it is one of those TV themes that's an absolute earworm, isn't it?
Oh, it's, the theme songs of that era are famously embedded in people that my generation, you hear that and it's like Manchurian Candidate, and like triggers some primal thing in your head. Yes. That I recall, that everywhere I was when I was sitting in my parents' living room on the floor watching it with the whole family. So yeah, DeVol is probably the richest guy in Hollywood from all of those theme songs that he wrote, because he cornered the market on big iconic sitcoms and other things too. But yeah, he was definitely a classic in that era.
Now, William Frawley, of course, one of the brilliant character actors, he played Bub on My Three Sons, the granddad. Of course, the rumours have flown around for a long time that he was fond of a little drink on a hot day. Yeah. Sometimes you were tasked with getting him back to the lot after a lunch. Yeah. How did you manage to do that, Barry?
Well, he loved Stan and I. And we were the only two people that he wouldn't chew out if we addressed the fact that, lunch started at noon and we're supposed to be back at 1, and it's 5 after 1 and he's still ordering another Cutty Sark. But if we would go, oh, hey, Uncle Bill, oh no, we got to go back to work. It's time to, we got to go. And what? I finished my cantaloupe and ice cream. I got another drink coming. And they go, yeah, but like, so, oh, all right. And then he would get up and go back to work and pretty much pass out sometimes in the afternoon, because he just nodded off from having 3 or 4 doubles at lunch. And you could never get away with that stuff today, but they put up with it. They actually indulged his, let him do what his indulging was. And whether Fred could be very protective, and I think he loved Bill too. And if there was any indication that they were displeased with what he was doing, I would guess that Fred stepped in and gone, no, he's untouchable. Don't. And William Gabris replaced him when William could not get past an insurance physical. That was what I'd heard, is that coming up to season 4 or 5, everybody had to go to see a doctor to get approved that you're not going to drop dead in the middle of shooting and cost the company millions. So what I'd heard is that Bill was his heart was so weak and so undetectable that they said, you just can't, he's on the verge of something catastrophic. So they sadly had to make a decision and go, we're going to have to cut you loose, which he really was upset about. because he, at that stage of his life, he had found fulfillment in being everybody's favorite, grandfather. And so he didn't really want to go. But, that's the way the business works. Like, I got fired when I was 4 years old.
Yes.
You fired him when he was 84. And then, there was that weird day where there was the crossover where they brought in William Demarest, and I think they had been lifelong competitors throughout the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, because they were cut from the same cloth. And they were professionals, but icy. I could see the icy kind of relationship that they had, because they had a handing off the baton, handing off the apron to the kitchen. And then William Demarest kind of moved in. But again, he was not a little more of a prickly, a little edgier, kind of grouchier. But
yeah, a grumpy bum. I think your brother Stanley described him as.
Not mean, but not the funny kind of alcoholic that William Frawley was. He was kind of a lovable guy and always liked to make us laugh. And Demarest was a little different in that area.
Don Grady passed away. It was 2012. You saw him not long before he left the world. What took him, Barry?
Well, I think he got a very aggressive form of cancer in the jaw. And it's after the fact, Monday morning quarterbacking, that he didn't really address it with traditional medicine right away. I think he tried to do holistic things, and maybe it would have progressed anyway. But in the end, he tried to do the more traditional chemo and radiation, all that. But it just was too advanced, and he eventually succumbed to cancer.
On a lighter note, Tramp was the family dog in My Three Sons, and he had this extraordinary knack for being able to lick your ears. I wanted to know how it was that Tramp was able to lick your guys' ears.
Lick on cue. Well,
lick on cue. That's it.
Little thing called Gerber's baby food, which apparently had a real love of. And they would smear a little of it behind your ear, and that was the key. That was the trick. That if you were going to get a big smooch from Tramp, he was just going up there to get that baby food off your face, and that was the trick.
I knew there was a secret there, Barry. I did.
Yes.
Tell me about riding around in Elvis Presley's limo.
I, again, right place, right time. I was shooting My Six Loves at Paramount, and Elvis was on the lot shooting one of his movies at Paramount. And I was on my bike, killing some time, just riding around the lot, blowing off some kid steam. And the big white limousine was parked outside of a sound stage and was idling. The back door was open, and I kind of thought, oh, this looks cool. And I stopped and stuck my head in and looked, and oh, wow, look at that, a limousine. Ooh, I was, really impressed by limousines, and still am, I guess. But when you're a kid, a Cadillac limousine, that's pretty crazy. And it was, all tricked out inside. It was, all fur and gold and white leather, tuck and roll leather. And then and a television. It was like, oh, wow, a television in a car. Couldn't believe that. This is 1962 or 3, and I was like, holy, that's like Jetsons kind of the future is here today. And then I heard a voice behind me going, oh yeah, you like it, son? Turned around, and it was, whoa, it's Elvis. I was a big fan. So he hopped in, said, just had it customized, delivered, Chuck Barris did some work on it. Want to go for a ride? And I was like, oh yeah, sure, great. And, I looked around, and my mother would have probably freaked out if she saw me get in a car with somebody, but I went, hey, hell with that. It's Elvis. I'm going. And so we didn't say much. And in retrospect, too, it's funny. It didn't occur to me till not that long ago. Sam Nelson, who is Rick Nelson's son, we're friends. And he said, Elvis was a huge fan of the Ozzie and Harriett show. He loved Rick, and he loved watching that show. And I went, oh, of course, he knew me from the Ozzie and Harriett show. I wasn't just some random kid, standing next to the limousine. He goes, come, you want to come with me, kid? He knew I was an actor, and he knew me from Ozzie and Harriett. I was like, of course, that makes total sense why he would think me as a fellow actor, and this would be cool. So, anyway, yeah, we didn't do much. 10-minute little drive around the lot, and he started pushing buttons and window going up and down, and turned on the TV, and we watched Popeye the Sailor, the cartoon, and a little chit chat. That's, nothing terrible. Had a Coke, and came back to where we started, and see you, kid. And that was it.
And what did you say to your mum?
When I finally did tell her, whatever it was, a week or two or a year later, she was like, "What? Well, how come I didn't get to go?" Like one of those things. I was like, "You weren't there. I don't know. It just happened by accident." Yeah, it was fun. It was crazy.
Your career flourished as a child star, and of course, you've continued working consistently. A couple of years ago now, you wrote a best-selling memoir, The Importance of Being Ernie, but you were very candid in that, Barry, talking about the fact that there were some wild moments with you. You didn't go completely off the rails, which is a blessing, but you did have your moments, didn't you?
Did my share of drinking, did my share of smoking, did my share of other things, nothing terribly dangerous. Nonetheless, that's what all of my peers were doing. And my peers at North Hollywood High School, maybe somewhere in Cleveland, it wasn't going on as much. But in Hollywood, North Hollywood particularly, it was a hotbed of rock and roll, and everybody's tuning in, turning on, dropping out. Yeah, I wasn't doing that because I still had a job that I had to take care of. But nonetheless, I was connecting to my peer group, and yeah, it could have gone the other way. I think for some of my other friends, it might have, of that era, they indulged a little too much. But again, I found it to be, certainly one of the best times of my life growing up, and I'm grateful that I went back to public school and was exposed to a lot of things that had I gone to the Hollywood Professional School, which is where a lot of child actors went, a very, very, protected, insulated world. Not a good thing. I was challenged by a lot of my peers that suddenly you're in algebra class and Ernie is sitting next to you, like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna pick on this, see where this goes. It was a good experience all the way around.
What's interesting too, when your Hollywood career slowed a bit, and it happens as everybody kind of transitions through life, you moved to New York, you took acting classes, and you start on Broadway. So that was a whole new dimension to your career, wasn't it?
Well, and again, my parents, in one of their wiser moments of advice was, you've got to train if you really want to pursue this as a professional, not just a child actor who gets by on his cuteness. And you've got to learn craft, and you've got to be, you've got to feel confident that you can handle all kinds of different roles. So yes, I loved the theater when, I was a late teen and in my 20s, and I went, I read the book Goodnight, Sweet Prince about the life of John Barrymore, and I thought, well, that sounds cool. And then I think I'd like a little of that fun. And so, yes, I was very fortunate. That was probably 75, but I had done another series after My Three Sons called Sons and Daughters. It was a very cool show about the 50s, and CBS aired it for a season. And then I had done a number of, well, in fact, one of the biggest prompters to pursue a real profession was Roddy McDowall when I did a movie called The Elevator. He was a very, very big child star in the 40s, I guess, 30s, 40s. And I said, "What did you do, Roddy? I know you've transitioned really well into an adult career." And he said, "Go to New York. Go to New York. Go learn about life. You'll learn about, your craft. You'll get outside of the crazy, BS of Hollywood, and find yourself." And so that was great advice. And yeah, I was very fortunate to kind of fall into a couple of really big shows back there, and make some lifelong friends and establish a whole other sense of who I was in a very different environment. So yeah, it was really fortunate, and that helped that transition period coming out of a big show and being known as Ernie, forever the nerd. So I wore that well. I liked being Ernie, but I had my eye on the future, and that was the place to go and work with me. I mean, some people, you go there and sit on your butt for like the rest of your life, but I got very lucky real quick there.
And then, of course, you came back to Hollywood, and for the past 20 years, you've starred in some of the biggest shows there's been around: Mad Men, The Nanny, Will and Grace, NCIS, The West Wing. Has there been a favorite role for you of all of those television credits you've notched up?
Well, I'd have to go decade to decade because there's just so much. But probably post My Three Sons, early 70s, I did Streets of San Francisco with Michael Douglas and Carl Malden. That was a highlight. In the 80s, I had a really nice recurring role on Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. Played Sheldon Bender, Lex Luthor's lawyer. That was fun. Into the 90s, I started doing some feature film work, Masters of the Universe. That was a trip to do that. And then, started doing some really top-notch. Big Love was I just discovered a note in my drawer the other day, a very, very sweet note from Bill Paxton. I had sent him some note. I don't know what I was talking about even, but his response was, "Congratulations, absolutely something to brag about. Best regards, Bill." And I was like, what the heck did I forget what I even mentioned to him, but he was, most supportive, genuine, great actor. But Big Love was great. Working with Harry Dean Stanton and Mad Men was a great experience.
Yes.
It's hard to single out. I mean, most recently, I think we discussed a little bit, Notorious Nick was a feature film.
What a great movie, because that was based on a real story.
The old story about a guy named Nick Newell who only had one arm. He's born with a congenital defect, so he only had, one good, really arm to sock with. His left arm, or maybe it was his right, his forearm was deformed, didn't have anything there, but he persevered against all the naysayers and the people who said, don't follow your dream. And, and he got into MMA against everyone's advice, and you're going to get your ass kicked every time you go out there. You have brain damage. Nonetheless, he ignored all those people and pursued a career that led him to finally fighting for the MMA championship in his division and winning.
You got to work with the great Clint Eastwood when he was directing the Jersey Boys movie. Was that pinch yourself wow moment? It
was really the pinch yourself wow moment for me was not just working with Clint. Clint is old school, rightly so. The old guys, before there was a video capture feed. Now everybody sits in what they call Video Village, and they're far away from the actual set. Sometimes the director, a few other people, and they're watching the camera, what the camera's filming. And then they'll shout out something, or an assistant director will come up and give you a note from the director. But Clint liked to stand next to the camera like the old guys would do. Stand the camera and look at you, watch your performance in real time. And so, he doesn't say action, doesn't say cut. They'll go, okay, lights, camera, take speed. And then you're waiting for the director to say action. He doesn't say that. He goes, whenever you're ready. Very kind of Dirty Harry-esque voice. Whenever you're ready. And you go, oh my God, I was ready. I was ready till I heard that. Until I heard Dirty Harry talking to me off camera. That was weird. You get used to it. And then he doesn't say cut. He goes, stop. And you go, oh, okay, it's not cut, it's stop. And whatever, it was a thrill to actually work with a legend like that.
Oh, I can imagine. Adam Sandler too. I read somewhere, Barry, that he cast you in one of his movies, but moreover, he is a My Three Sons super fan.
I did a little movie in his universe called Dickie Roberts, former child actor, and Happy Madison, which is his company, produced it. Small role, the little cameo kind of thing. Yeah. And then one day I was on the lot over at Sony, and I knew where his offices were. And I thought, yeah, I'll be a little proactive here. I'll go over there and try to, say hi if he's there. If he's not, nobody was in the office, and I walked out. But as I left, he came speeding up in his golf cart covered in sweat. He's a big basketball fan, player. And I went, okay, here goes. I go, hey, Adam, I don't know. I'm Barry Livingston. Oh, man. Oh, yeah. I said, yeah, I did Dickie Roberts. And yeah, sure. I said, man, I'd love to be in one of your movies sometime. Oh, sure. I'll put you in one of my movies. Yeah, absolutely. No problem. I was like, okay, great. So from that point on, I would get a call. And then he did maybe 1, 2, 3 movies in a row. He did The Longest Yard, a couple other things kind of came along, and I'd get a call to come in and read. And I know my agent's not making that happen. So I always went, well, that must be Adam. Anyway, finally got to You Don't Mess with the Zohan. I got the call to come in and read. And And then they were like, okay, read with casting. And then I got a call coming, can you go to a table read? And you don't have the role yet, but, they're requesting you go to a table read, which is all the, stars of the show. And it's at the studio. But, I thought, well, you're still auditioning, really. I mean, anyway, Adam came up behind me and he goes, oh, see, I told you I'd get you something good. I told you. And I was like, this is like 5 years later. I'm going, oh my God, this guy remembered, after the reading, he kind of gives me the thumbs up and I'm going, damn, that was cool. And lo and behold, I got the part. So, he's a mensch. He's a good man.
Well, of course, and there was a My Three Sons Day declared in Los Angeles back in 2012. That must have been kind of surreal.
Yeah, that was surreal. Everything's surreal at this point, but that seemed extra surreal. Just that that somebody at City Hall, I guess, I forget who the city councilman was that put that forward. But nonetheless, yeah, My Three Sons. I don't know what it gets me, a free, donut in the cafeteria at City Hall or something. I get out of jail free card or something. But it was fun.
Oh, you got to get into jail first. That's the thing, Barry, isn't it? But I tell you what, not only is your career flourishing, and right now you're in General Hospital playing the coroner, which for you must be a bit kind of odd because however many years ago, didn't you play a role of somebody or other who had an axe in their back?
Well, honestly, I'm a journeyman actor and I get whatever roles come along. Some are nice, some are not so nice. I usually take whatever comes to me. But yes, I did the General Hospital probably 20 years ago and I played, a real minor little role, but I was an ER doctor who stumbles into the operating room and got an axe in my back with some maniac embedded into my skull or something. And it was like, well, so that was it. I kind of knew that was not going to be a recurring role. Fast forward 20 years later, I'm playing a coroner in a couple episodes of General Hospital. But I've had a nice recurring role on Bosch, the medical examiner on Bosch for 4 or so episodes. So maybe they saw that and thought, he can play that guy. So
Lessons in Chemistry, of course.
Lessons, and that's such a great show, such a great show. It was so much fun to work with Brie Larson and Bo Bridges, who I talked to him a little bit, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I was like one of my very first shows was with you." I was like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah. My Three Sons, one of my very, it's just starting out, and I got a role, probably one of Robbie's friends or something, and had a small role in My Three Sons, and so it was fun."
Mrs. Davis, of course, that wonderful miniseries with Betty Gilpin. You're naked in that.
You noticed?
How does that feel? It's difficult not to notice.
Look, at my age, I thought, what have I got to hide? It was an interesting day at the office. I never had done anything quite like that. I knew it would be done discreetly. And then Betty was supposed to take her clothes off too, although I'd heard after the fact she had a stunt double and body double.
You didn't, did you? You were all you, I hope.
All me, baby. It's all
Good.
me.
Great, and, fabulous.
But it read pretty quick, clearly his legs are crossed, sitting at a bar. All the important bits are not being shown. But nonetheless, everything else, boom, you take it for what it is. So yeah, it was oddly liberating, and it was kind of a blast. It was kind of a fun day. They treat you, very carefully these days. People are very conscientious about Me Tooing anybody and not saying the wrong things and being polite and not. They have an intimacy coordinator is a new job on set. But, they get you robed up, and the second they get ready to shoot, they take the robe off, and you're sitting there, and you're going, "Oh, it's kind of chilly." Suddenly, I was pretty good with that robe on now. And then, but then you have the scene. It's a very funny scene, very very lovely scene, and Betty was great. And then cut, and then they come up and wrap you up, and so it was fun. And during the strike, it was funny. The actor strike recently. I was walking down the street at Paramount, and I was going to march with the strikers. And a guy was parking his car on the street. And he goes, hey, can you help me get in? It's a tight spot. And I said, yeah, sure. Anyway, he parks. I go down, walk, and he comes walking to me. He goes, were you and Mrs. Davis? I said, oh, yeah. And of course, I knew I was naked. And then I don't know where he's going with this. And he goes, I wrote that scene. He says, I'm the guy who wrote that scene. His name is Adolfo Rodon. Because I was one of the producers. I wrote that scene. I was like, oh my God, well, here, let me give you a big hug. Because that was one of my favorite little spots, little roles recently. And it's a very funny little scene. You'll have to watch it.
Well, I also think that somewhere in the afterlife, your mother, she'd probably be thrilled.
She was probably looking down and smiling and going, good boy. Yes, yes. But you make sure you get paid. You don't take your clothes off without getting paid. And fortunately, I got my paycheck.
Well, you know something else that deserves some fabulous applause, thunderous even, because not only is your career flourishing, but you've been blissfully wed to your wife, Karen, since 1983. And that is 40 years, Barry Livingston. Another oddity in Hollywood, a 4-decade and counting happy marriage.
How did that happen? I have the most tolerant, level-headed, bright, the sweetest human being in the world as my partner. You know, if I can only do half as much for her as she does for me, I think it would be somewhat reciprocating. But yes, we are a fairly good match, and it's wonderful. You know, I mean, how lucky. I mean, I went through a few pretty weird relationships prior to meeting my wife. I'll tell you my real quick. We're probably ending things here, but we met at a bar in 1980, a very large, kind of a big club, and it was around 11:30, and it was a real meat market. It was just, you know, people hooking up left and right during the urban cowboy era. So loud country music blaring. And I'm sitting at the bar and I'm smoking a cigarette. And she sat down next to me. And so I'm going, oh, well, that's lucky me. And so anyway, we spoke for a few seconds or so. And I said, let's go somewhere quieter because it's you know, it's so loud in here. I can barely hear you. We walk outside, Saturday night, 11:30. Crowds out on the sidewalk, and I spot this girl laying on her flat on her back on the lawn in front of this restaurant club called the Red Onion. And I said, well, let's go over and see if she's okay. It looks weird. Walk up to the girl, and she's drenched in blood. Her dress, she had a white dress on. As we got closer, I thought, oh, it looks, what's that, roses? I was like, oh my God. And she had slashed her wrist. We're about 15 minutes into our relationship here at this point. And I'm going, and she was in med school. And so she immediately sprung into action, tied a tourniquet. The girl, she listened, she goes, she's breathing, but she has no pulse. This is 1980. There's no cell phones. There's no 911. So I had to run back. She said, go get help. So I ran back in, plowed through a line, which nobody was happy about that because I'm trying to get to the front of the entrance. And I finally got there and I said, some girl's out on your front lawn here. She's not going to make it. She looks like she's almost dead. And they did one of those, got the word to the band. The band stopped playing. If there's a doctor in the house, please come to the front immediately. And so anyway, that was the end. The doctor did come out. Karen got her breathing, stabilized, tried to tourniquet on, and the ambulance came, and that was our first 15, 20 minutes of our relationship. And I said, oh, this girl's got life-saving skills. That's nice. And I went, this could work. And
it has. Well, 40 years on, there you are, still happy. And I tell you what, you will never forget that first night you met.
No, we will not. And apparently the girl survived. Karen's sister worked at a hospital nearby, and she said, oh, a Jane Doe came in around midnight. That was the girl, and she made it. So, we did the right thing.
And how nice it is that you're able to know that too. So that kind of tidies up, hopefully, that story. Barry, it's been lovely chatting to you. You are fabulous. Anything coming up in the future you'd like to chat about that you can share with your fans? Have you got any more movie or TV projects? What about another memoir? I know there was the importance of being Ernie. Is there another book in you, do you think? Or
that's a project. That's a real commitment. That's a real, once I got the ball rolling, it was fun to do. I'm not sure I could get that ball rolling again, although that came around the time that I was in The Social Network. And I just kind of felt, wow, my career has come kind of a full circle. It started in, My Three Sons, a big blast of fame that hits you, the post-lull, what I did to survive, all that. kept, fighting my way back into somewhat of a career. And The Social Network was an Academy Award winning movie. I thought, well, that's kind of nice bookendings of things. So I'm not, I mean, I guess I could probably do it again, but not yet. I don't know.
Not yet. Well,
Not
we'll
yet.
watch this space and stay tuned, as they say.
Yes, please do. Please do.
Yeah.